Welcome, everybody, to New Polity's podcast. I'm Jacob Imam, and I'm proudly joined today by Mike Sullivan. Mike is kind of our town hero in many ways, most revered and respected, not only because we can always count on his prayers, and not only because we're super impressed with his procreative ability along with his wife, having made 11 children, but also because he can build the things that we cannot, and he can fix the things that we break while we are wallowing in this vast, technologically opaque ocean. He actually understands how to build a paddle and make one, get around in these little island things. How's that for a metaphor? I tried really hard.
If that makes me a hero, then we have a problem in our society. And I think that's what we're here to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. We are here actually in part to announce a really exciting new thing that New Polity's doing. So as you all have figured out, New Polity is a think tank to dig into the social doctrine of our church and to be able to teach that. But also we don't want to just be all talk and no game. We want to start putting this into action in our own lives and in our city of Steubenville. And so we're happily announcing today the opening of the Steubenville workshop.
It's going to be awesome.
It is going to be awesome. What is the Steubenville workshop? I mean, how do you want to describe it?
So I'll describe it. I think I'm the first subscriber, maybe.
Yeah, that's right. You are. Yeah.
So it's a kind of like a fitness club where you can go and use the equipment. But rather than for fitness, this is for creativity. It's a creative space. It's a productive property that you can subscribe to be able to use, come in whenever you need to, have classes, learn about, using tools, learn about different projects with the tools, create things and sell things.
Yeah, we're going to help you sell whatever you make.
So that's going to be really neat.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. So this is kind of our first attempt to help get more productive property in the hands of our neighbors, and helping them figure out how to use it and how to sell it. There's quite a bit in here. It is a subscription rate, and so that might sound kind of like rent, and it kind of is in a certain respect, except for the fact that when you realize that you would have to be a member for 50 years before you'd actually pay off all these tools if you were to buy them yourself.
Yep.
And that doesn't include utilities or housing the space. So this is really trying to be a collective effort on our part. So
it's going to be a phenomenal service. I think it's going to raise the bar in terms of just craftsmanship in our area, because people have the ability to go and use the tools and learn how to do things, but also be inspired by other people who are a little further along in their development and their craftsmanship. And I think, for me, I started out a long time ago, maybe, I don't know, when I was 17 or 18, just really interested in building things and doing things. And I would pick up tools at yard sales in Denver, just as a kid, and bring them home and, annoy my father by filling up the garage with all my tools.
What was one of those tools?
So I got a lathe. I got a lathe, which was just a piece of junk. It was two ends of the lathe, and you had to use some pipes to connect them. And I got a motor and some pulleys and made the thing work. And I spent hours just, with the wrong kind of chisels, just making things on the lathe, learning how to, make little round boxes, and learning how to make candlesticks and bowls.
So for those who don't know, a lathe holds a piece of wood on there and spins it around really quickly.
Right. So
you're at it with a chisel, and you can kind of shape it to however you want.
So it has a tool rest, and you can work the chisel back and forth and make something that's out of round perfectly round, and then you can also mount things on the main chuck, and you can gouge out the center of a bowl and make goblets. And it was just really fun as a teenager to spend time just being creative on that. And I did a lot of work on automobiles and stuff like that, rebuilding engines and getting old Volvos working. But so for me, it's always been a struggle to get my hands on tools. So I never had a great table saw until a few years ago, and I'm 50 next year. So it's it's one of those things that I've always built things and done things, but I've always just gotten by with decent tools that or yard sale tools or whatever. Now I also have the construction business, so that's been, it's easier for me to have access to tools because I need them for work. But in my personal life, just being a guy who likes to do creative things, it was always difficult to justify going out and buying a really expensive tool. And so this gives an opportunity to people to just have that stuff accessible and be able to be creative, have some lessons on how to use it, lessons on what to make. It's just, I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, good. I'm really glad you are. So we're going to try and time up one of the fun classes the day before the next New Polity conference. So if anybody wants to come out a day early and learn how to make a kneeler or something like that, we haven't decided what it's going to be.
Yeah.
But we'll come up with something good and manageable for you to get back to your house.
A trebuchet.
So, yeah, there you go. That's what we'll do.
Make a full-size trebuchet
for the political revolution
That's
that we are
right.
planning. Yeah. Well, we wanted to sit down and kind of talk, a little bit, explain what we're doing with the shop and describe a little bit of what, the reasons why we're doing it, and kind of in a vague way, but also more specifically in a theological way, on kind of a theology of work also. And this is something that is fundamental to our humanity. John Paul II says it's fundamental to any conversations we're going to have about the economy or about politics. And it's also something of a properly devotional point of contemplation for us as well. And so we were just going to kind of sit back and give kind of a meta narrative of why we decided to start with tools first instead of anything else. And hopefully, as we're trying to talk through John Paul II's theology of work and the rest of the traditions, that giving some broad outlines, and also in a sense, just starting a conversation, which we hope to pick up later on in its own series, that we can do that kind of under the context of this, new project for St. Joseph and for our friends in Steubenville. So that's what I think where we're going to start. There's a lot of perhaps obvious reflections that we can have about work. I mean, I like the story that you told me about your sons in welding. There's just kind of like a natural propensity that we all have towards learning things, building things, being creative.
Yeah, we have a creativity that's just built within us, we're built in the image and likeness of God. And you'll get into that in more depth, but just the idea that this example of my sons with the welder, just having a tool at your disposal.
So you just brought home a welder one day.
I did. Yeah. I don't know how to weld. I mean, I could probably do a farmer's weld on a tractor if I had to, but I just got a welder because the boys were really interested in welding. And so I just got a welder and I put it in the garage, and I bought them some, some of the wire for the welder and other things, some angle iron, and we had some old mini bikes and go-karts kicking around, and I just let them at it. And they're curious. They're very creative, and they love doing really redneck things. So they do. It's really fun.
Your kids are more rednecker than mine.
Yeah, exactly. So it was such a blast to watch them, because they would take a broken mini bike and figure out how to weld it to the rear end of a go-kart and make it into like a 3-wheeler, and then they turned it back into a 4-wheeled machine, but not really a go-kart, and with a steering wheel, and just, it was really fun to see them just have at it. Well, now they are both really good at welding, and my younger son works on a farm in New Mexico, and he does a lot of welding for the farm, making fence corners and gates and stuff like that, and my other son just, they like to make truck parts. So they make bumpers, and they make, the beds on their trucks and things like that. And it's just really neat. And I can see that, if my input there was basically just saying, here are the safety practices for a welder. Let's watch this video on YouTube. These are the safety practices for the grinder. Let's, don't burn anything down. Just the basic guidelines. But have at it. Go to town. Enjoy. Be careful, but enjoy yourselves. And they sure did. And it's really neat. It's a very edifying thing to watch.
Yeah. I think about kind of like the joy in that story. It's compared to the drudgery that a lot of people feel in their jobs.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of friends that I have really think about work as something that's post-lapsarian, something that came as a result of the fall, as a result of sin.
Yep.
They think about the fact that the garden was full of fruit trees, the Edenic garden was full of fruit trees, but we kind of overlook the command of God to Adam that we are to keep in the till.
Yep.
In that same, but the keeping and tilling is more like the welding and building four-wheelers.
Exactly. I mean, it's a creative and joyful act. I mean, it's written in our very nature.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, before the fall, God, he didn't let it rain until man was in place, because there wasn't anybody there to till it. And so it's, obviously pre-lapsarian. For me, I don't do a lot. My wife has big gardens and, we have a little farm thing going, and but I love to till the garden. That's one of those things
really?
It's
okay.
just
wow.
And every year, for the last few years, the boys have been doing it. I've been kind of busy with other things, but I just love it. It's the best thing to get out there in the spring, turn the soil over. You can smell the rich soil, and it feels so natural and so good, and it's so grounding. Literally, it's grounding. I mean, it's beautiful. So I don't do much with the gardens. I do a lot with like decorative gardens and stuff like that around the farm, but I don't do a lot with the vegetable gardens just because of time. But that's the one thing I really love to do. So.
That's interesting. Yeah, I had a till garden once. I didn't really enjoy it. It was really bad soil. It was mainly rocks.
Well, yeah, that's different.
Yeah,
that's not really tilling. That's
but it's nice.
That's a battle with the ground.
Yeah, that's post-lapsarian.
Yeah, absolutely. That's thorns and thistles and sweat of your brow.
Yeah, but then we'd have the Dohertys coming over and telling me, no, you just don't know how to work with the thorns and the thistles, man.
Yeah.
And they would be right.
The thorns are delicious if you know how to cook them.
Yeah. Have you done that?
No.
No, you never know with the Dohertys. They might do that. I want to just kind of read a few things just to make sure that people know that we aren't just saying things, making our own tradition. John Paul II, of course, wrote an entire encyclical, Laborem Exercens, on the theology of work. And he starts that off by saying that man is made to be in the visible universe, an image of and likeness of God himself, and he is placed in it in order to subdue the earth. From the beginning, therefore, he is called to work. Work is one of the characteristics that distinguish man from the rest of creatures, whose activity for sustaining their lives cannot be called work. Only man is capable of work, and only man works. Sorry, pigeons.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't. Yeah, I mean that is kind of an amazing thing. Also, of the union of the need for an intelligible or intelligent soul as well.
Yeah,
like for work to actually be possible.
I mean, otherwise it's all by instinct. I often joke around about how chickens are an animative vegetable because, it's sort of our joke that they're so incredibly stupid, but they'll eat anything, they'll peck at anything, but they kind of know what they want to get and they'll go around and nibble on the grass and stuff like that. But the difference is that we have grace, we have reason, we have creativity, we have art. There's so many things that elevate man, and all of those things are expressed in our work. Like even the job with the absolute drudgery that many people experience can be edifying. It's difficult in many cases, but it can be an edifying experience. You don't have to be some of the most boring tasks that I have to do in my work, drywalling, mudding a wall or something like that, gives me an opportunity to think about better things or higher things. And changing the spark plugs on a tractor or something like that. I'm not thinking about the spark plugs, I'm thinking about other things. It's just, it's more of a mindset, like being elevated as a man and being able to work. It almost doesn't matter what you're doing. And I've done everything. I mean, I worked at a Domino's Pizza and a Chick-fil-A and delivered papers and worked at a gas station overnight and all those things. And of course, those jobs were lousy. I didn't like it. It wasn't something I was excited and eager to go do, but it was something I did go eagerly to do because it's what I needed to do. And I sure as heck wasn't thinking about, putting cheese on the pizza. I was thinking about other things that are higher,
Yeah.
So
I suppose part of the time when you find that one's dignity is truly being maximized in work is when you're actually able to think. I mean, when the most contemplative thing you can do in that moment is thinking about what you're doing. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that part of the reason is that work really is a gift that you're giving others.
Yes.
So John Paul II talks about work. Why is it that work really enables us to be more like God? Because that's, kind of how he starts us off. Like, insofar as we are made in the image and likeness of God, so work thus makes us more into his image and into his likeness. We're leaning into that. And so kind of looking around, I was like, okay, so what virtue actually is the virtue that leads us to being more like God? Like, how is it that the work begins to reshape, reorient, and rehabituate our souls to be oriented towards him? And John Paul II gives us a kind of a strange answer. He says industriousness.
Yeah. It's really something.
Because industriousness sounds very modern. It's definitely not like a medieval.
It's not something you'd expect in an encyclical by John Paul II as a virtue. It's just kind of, it doesn't seem like but it makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I just kind of like banging my head against the wall for a little while, trying to figure out like what does this actually correspond to, and so first I was looking around at trying to figure out what was the medieval virtue that corresponds to this. The reason why I was looking at medieval is because the medievals looked at and wrote about everything. So if I could figure out what they called it, then I knew they wrote about it, and then I get some answers. And and I think the closest thing that I got to
that's the little door to the rabbit hole.
Yeah,
you found the door. You can open it up and climb in.
Where's the knob? I'll turn it. The austerity was the virtue that I found, in Saint Bonaventure, and where he talks about austerity being a mental disposition, so a virtue of the intellect, in which we are able to set aside all concupiscence, to focus on the good, to choose the hard over the easy, he says, and to prefer the poor and the vile. Really,
that's not the way we think about things. That's not very comfortable.
No, it's not at all.
But could you relate that to the industriousness, the idea of industriousness? So
I was struggling to do that. and I think there's probably some ways in which, I could make a guess on that. And then then I tried a different technique. And that was looking for the opposing vices.
Oh yeah, right.
Because every virtue has an opposing vice. For those of you who haven't heard this before, I'm going to knock over a whole bunch of things right now. Who haven't heard that before, though the dispositions of our soul are, in a sense, all connected with one another, you can't really separate the virtues out from one another all that well. There are certain aspects that of our soul that become animated and activated in certain situations. And in those certain situations, you find the what we call particular virtues emerging out of them. But in those particular situations, you could have a sinful disposition that is awakened. We call those vices. So in certain contexts, you could have vice awakened or virtue awakened. And so those two dispositions of the soul, the vice or the virtue, oppose one another. And so to be able to understand what the opposing virtue is to a vice, to understand what the situation is and understand what the vice is that opposes virtue, really, I think, helps illuminate what that virtue is. So in understanding that the magnificent man, when he's not, changing the structure and culture of his town by his major gifts, he's being mean, really, really illuminates just how great magnificence is.
Right.
Right.
It's the tug of war.
Yeah.
And the tug of war, like the truth lies it's kind of in the rope, in the tension between the two.
Yeah.
That there's, where we ought to go with that virtue is kind of defined in a sense by the vice and the virtue.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's well put. Never thought about that before. So I'm not going to think about it too much now because I'll bore people. But that's
moving on.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I think that is, and that's just where you need grace to help you win the tension. Win over the tension. So, anyways, I looked at the kind of around, and I mean, it should have been kind of obvious, but sloth.
Absolutely.
I think it has to be the opposing vice.
Would you say that to industriousness?
Yeah, I think so. And to austerity in a certain regard. And so let me just read out what St. Thomas says on sloth or sleuth.
Sloth.
And we'll kind of discuss
you say sloth, I say sloth.
Hand me that potato. Sloth, according to the Damascene, St. Thomas says, is an oppressive sorrow which so weighs upon man's mind that he wants to do nothing. And thus, acid things are also cold. That's a really interesting metaphor that he uses. Hence, sloth implies a certain weariness of work. As appears on the gloss of Psalm 106, their soul abhorred all manner of meat. And from the definition of some who say that sloth is a sluggishness of the mind, which neglects to begin good.
Wow. It's kind of brutal.
Yeah, it is super brutal. But I think that makes sense.
It does.
This helps make sense of a few different things. First is that he considers this a sluggishness of the mind.
Yep.
And which fits with the austerity, the understanding of Bonaventure's austerity, where it's a virtue of the intellect.
Yep.
But it also, I think more than anything, if it neglects to begin good, then it is a vice that is fundamentally hateful.
Absolutely.
So this is why St. Thomas places sloth in, his treatment of charity, where it is something that starts to be corrosive, almost acidic, to the community at large. And whereas within work, I mean, all of our work, almost all of our work is at least to be, if not actually, for the common good.
Yes.
We have wages and money.
We have personal benefits from it, but generally it's for the common good.
Well, even it's kind of a technique. I think money is kind of like a technique where it makes our work self-referential.
Yep.
And insofar as I'm going to make, this new stool for you, Mike, and that is in fact a gift that I made for you.
Yeah.
Money makes it self-referential. No, I'm not trying to say that that's bad or we shouldn't do that, but I think
here's this gift, but it's going to cost you $50.
That's right.
So that changes it. It actually does. It changes it. But I think there's another part of this that the productivity of work is, it's a participation in creation in a way.
Yeah.
It's sort of like the secondary causes of creation coming to its fulfillment.
Yeah.
And I think that sloth, it undermines that because it's selfish.
Yeah.
And there's a generosity that comes with work. There's a teamwork, a collaborative teamwork. There's a communal aspect to it. It's even if we're working alone, there's something communal about what we're doing. And
how so?
I think that it's benefiting the common good. Yeah. So others around us are benefiting from our industriousness. and the more we put into our work, the more it redounds to God's glory and the benefit of others.
Yeah, I think this might be the key, because in work is an external act. St. John Paul II in Labor Macpherson says that it's always a transitive act, meaning that it's always acting on an object.
Yeah.
Our work is so it's fundamentally externalizing. It does in fact alter the common good.
Yeah. That is not to say necessarily that it's tied to the temporal order either.
Yeah.
Like the Carmelite nun is working hard, praying for the salvation of others.
Yeah.
That's work too.
Totally.
But it doesn't have a visible, tangible sense. It's a spiritual, tangible sense.
Yeah, I think this is so interesting. I tried to make a distinction between productive labor and productive leisure in my thinking before. Yeah. I'm not sure if this actually works. I'm going to have to think about it a little bit more, but I'm going to, you're hearing me think out loud here, everybody. In certain regards, there's a distinction between a productive labor activity where, I'm making a workbench so that others can work on the bench or whatever. And then there's a sense of a productive leisure where there is no identifiable difference within our human ability to comprehend causes and effects.
Yeah.
And so I tried to, in a sense, like make this comparison to preaching and teaching or something like that before.
Yeah.
But the laborer is owed his dues, St. Paul says, and then he specifically names preaching and teaching. So it can't quite be that.
Right. So that actually is a job.
Yeah.
Even though it's something that takes place within the context of leisure. Yeah. But there's another aspect to that, and that is the student is really the one benefiting in the leisure of that activity. I think that the teacher...
But I think prayer is really important, because I think a lot of us would say, well, that is just, pure leisure activity. And I think that just unveils our lack of belief of the efficacy of prayer. Yeah. So we just don't actually believe.
Yeah, because how do you explain the Carmelite nun, the contemplative nun somewhere that's just rocking the world with her prayers?
Totally.
How do you explain that the efficacy of that has to be acknowledged?
Yeah. There's a story that I don't know all that well, so I shouldn't tell, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Go for it,
man. Charlemagne would be scandalized when he learned how little a bishop would leave for the monks after he died to pray for his soul, because he realized that bishop did not actually believe in the truth of the gospel. I think there's more to this. We'll leave it to like a real historian like Andrew Jones to tell that out. But I think that is, something that we have to catch ourselves on. Yeah. I often find myself thinking that, I should be working now, or instead of praying and realize and saying, well,
wait a minute,
I'm actually just,
dude, you're working.
Yeah, I just totally thought that the prayer doesn't do anything. So I think there's an important aspect there, but that's not to say that there's not work that's not earth, or there's not the problem that we find in modern societies where people are actually engaged in leisure activities that are not truly work.
That's right. Yeah.
Like Chesterton talks about, the I mean, this is kind of mean, but he talks about the man who dresses up in a business suit and walks into the middle of town to pretend to work all day. Yeah. Meanwhile, his wife
his wife is working really hard.
Well, he says oftentimes their wives go to the park and don't even pretend to work all day.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That's perfect.
That's what's wrong with the world. Yeah.
There's another point about this idea. I guess it just bears, by illustration, there would be a vice involved if a man were to go, say, to the Adoration Chapel when he should be going to work.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And then the other side of that would be, like, why can't a guy who's at work be praying all day? Like the constant conversation could be going on between the guy and God while he's flipping burgers or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
pray unceasingly.
Pray
Like,
unceasingly,
yeah.
but that doesn't mean you need to go and sit in the church at the
Yeah.
expense of the the livelihood of yourself or your family,
Yeah.
or
No, it also surrenders. It's an idea that work is not a form of prayer, of communion with God, or
Mhm.
cannot be. Um, but I wanted to jump back on to this idea of the externalization of like or not. I guess we're still in that conversation of work being a transitive act, and I think this is just a really important point for the popes. John Paul II spends an incredible amount of time on it, both in the Liber Exercens as well as Centesimus Annus, in which he says that this is the key by which we're to understand what private property really is.
Oh yeah.
Because if we are starting with the basis of the universal destination of goods, where God, in his infinite goodness, created the world and gifted it to all of us and not just some of us,
Mm-hmm.
then we're left asking the question, well, how does productive property, play a role into this at all? So John Paul II says here, well, first he defines this universal destination. Um, he says that God gave the earth to the whole human race for the sustenance of all its members without excluding or favoring anyone.
Exactly.
So it's like, well, how do we go from there? And he says, the earth does not yield its fruits without a particular human response to God's gift. That is to say, without work. It is through work that man, using his intelligence and exercising his freedom, which shows why animals can't work.
Yep.
Using his intelligence and exercising his freedom, succeeds in dominating the earth and making it a fitting home. In this way, he makes part of the earth his own, precisely the part which he has acquired through work. This is the origins of individual property, he says. And obviously, continues, he also has the responsibility not to hinder others from having their own part of God's gift. Indeed, he must cooperate with others so that together all can dominate the earth. Because it's a command that God gave us to all of us.
Yeah, it's incredible. So, by our work, we're participating, but we're also benefiting. Mm-hmm. We get a tangible chunk of it all. It's like that's our little piece that we get for in response to our diligence and our hard work and our virtue.
Yeah. And it makes it, but it also is just, I think it just blows up the whole discussion that we have in kind of modern free market circles where it's, well, ownership is just a juridical thing.
Right.
It's whoever signs on the dotted line.
Yep.
On the one hand, or on the other,
the deed says this, and therefore.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then on the other side, it could just be like a practical thing. People say, well, it's just like pragmatically the best way to divide goods of this earth so that we can all have things.
Some people wouldn't really know what to do with land, right? That's the lamest argument I've ever heard. But, yeah,
wow.
They actually, you need to teach them how to use the land if they don't know how to use the land.
Yeah, absolutely. That's like the call is universal for all of us to subdue and dominate the earth, and so we have to enable one another to do that.
Yep.
I mean, I think that's just a huge thing. We are all called to help one another get the goods of the earth. But anyways, he says this, it's not so much a juridical thing, and it's not so much a prudential thing. It's actually properly a metaphysical thing. In the same way that God creates the world and in so doing externalizes his own internal nature, and thus it has its, all of creation has this aspect of the divine illumined in it. So when we work, we do externalize a part of our internal nature, impressing ourselves onto the object of our work, and thus giving it our likeness.
Right.
And so, in a sense, it bears two likenesses all of a sudden.
Yep.
And that is the beautiful marriage between the world and ourselves, and also why then it can be whatever we make can be a proper gift to another, because it captures a part of ourselves within it.
Yep. And it's a beautiful way. It's the beautiful way that we participate in creation. Yeah. We're fulfilling our nature and the nature of the universe in improving things with our labor.
Yeah. This isn't proving things is like a really interesting thing. I want to get your take on this. So within our call to work, which is, a prelapsarian call by which we become more like God, there's no doubt that there are certain like implicit powers of our souls that are awakened in it.
Yeah.
So like this is, I think, part of the reason why we find austerity, industriousness as true virtues. Virtues meaning dispositions of souls that make us more like unto the one true God.
Yep.
Is that our potentials are activated.
Yep.
Absolutely. I've never really worked before, so tell me what that's like.
I don't really know. I just sit in front of a computer these days. So, really, I think what you need to do is explore the relationship of, what does it mean to be a steward of the land and to dominate, or to have dominion over, not to dominate, but to have dominion over. Yeah. What does it mean to help things bear fruit? Really, that's what tilling is. You're helping things bear fruit. And I think some good examples would be, in any business, you can come in and you can make things better. Maybe not any business, but in most businesses, you can come in and you can make things better that benefit, that not only make the product better, they make the employees happier and make it a better, more edifying experience for them. Just the interactions within the thing, the culture of the business or whatever the work is that's being accomplished, and all of that. Each of those inputs has something to do with stewardship and with a culture of really understanding that we're participating in God's work, and that should permeate all that we do. And most workplaces don't mirror that in any way. I mean, for most people, there's a drudgery about work, and there's a lack of creativity, and most people just get through the workday. I don't remember the statistics, but there was a poll I read that I don't remember the percentage, but a great number of people, the majority of people, just check the box every day. They just get through the day, and that's stifling, and it undermines the beauty of creation. On so many layers and in so many ways.
Yeah, I wonder if that's like part of the, or I suppose no doubt it's part of the, hopeful looking ahead of retirement for so many people.
Yeah.
Because work is considered to be kind of a result of the fall. It's drudgery.
Right.
It's annoying. It's not freedom.
Thorns and thistles and sweat on my brow.
Yep.
It's captivity.
Yep. And so I just want to release from that.
Yeah.
And that
I'm going to go to Florida and I'm going to buy a boat.
Never owned a boat before, but I tell you what.
No, really, I think there's something to that. Like, we're always growing. We're always learning. And we should always be working.
Yeah.
Like work doesn't stop when you don't have a 9-to-5 job.
Yeah. Your
work should be transformed into something that benefits the society all of society in a different way.
Yeah.
No,
but that is kind of a scary thought, actually. If we've created an environment in which work is so dehumanizing,
absolutely,
that people start to think that work is itself dehumanizing, then we've actually missed what the Pope says
absolutely
is a fundamental way in which we become more human.
Absolutely. So we're dehumanizing people with our current culture of work.
That's actually pretty scary, because if work is attached to our humanity, where we become more human, as John Paul II says, and it is like a context, a necessary context by which we get virtue. Like, of course, it's necessary. Like, we have to till to be able to eat.
Mm-hmm.
We need to, cut wood in order to have houses that we can live in.
Yep.
We have to shear the sheep to have clothes,
yep,
cover our nakedness. So it's a necessary condition, but it's a necessary, it's necessary for the sake that we might engage in it, so that we might become virtuous. I mean, God does this for everything in our life, right?
Right.
He sets the conditions so that we might be able to act in virtue. But if we have place the objective meaning of work over the subjective meaning of work, meaning we've put products before people.
Right.
And think that the economy is a good in of itself, sui generis, but not rather than something that is just something for man to be able to have his dignity met and increased, augmented, then we've absolutely subverted the natural order of, and we cut off our path to heaven.
I think, especially in our culture, that is the case.
Yeah.
I think I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer, but but really, if you look at our social programs are constructed in such a way as to eliminate the need for work.
Mm.
The typical workplace is it's 8 to 5 or 8 to 6 every day, and it's you're a cog in the machine. And I think that there are a lot of companies and organizations that do a lot to overcome that and create opportunities for people to be more creative and to be more self-directed and really to be productive. But by and large, I think we have a societal problem in that regard. That it's really dehumanizing. Companies are, there's just between usury and captivity.
Yeah,
it's really a problem. And I think the big thing to get around that would be creativity, and also understanding for the worker that even in that situation there can be an edifying opportunity, as long as your disposition of soul is such that you can get through the workday, but you're praying and you're thinking about higher things, and you're working toward goals of finding other jobs that are better, or it's a lot of people can be trapped, and it can be really very difficult. But there can be hope in those situations too.
Yeah, I want to talk about some of that hope. I just wanted to read this from John Paul II too. He says, I mean, he's not a Luddite. I don't think. Maybe he was. I never asked him. But he was very hesitant about this idea of continual growth, which did render people in these positions where their jobs are more like what you just described.
Mm-hmm.
He said, in some instances, technology can cease to be man's ally and almost become his enemy, as when the mechanization of work supplants him, taking away all personal satisfaction and the incentive to creativity and responsibility, when it deprives many workers of their previous employment, or when, through exalting the machine, it reduces man to the status of a slave, someone who's just at the service of the slave, pressing buttons.
Exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. And in this situation, the I think the creative, why I'm so excited about the skilled trades, and why my orientation was like, let's start this workshop. Let's start, and like people heard me talk about a college that would be awesome to start one day, which builds together the skilled trades and the Catholic liberal arts, is precisely because there's actually room there, because our modern to still be creative,
absolutely,
to be able to provide for a family well,
absolutely,
and it's precisely because our world despises the blue collar trades.
Yep.
We
absolutely
we often say that within as we leave our Christian society behind, as we've become post-Christian again in our culture, we had no other choice but to readopt paganism. You only have virtue or vice. You only have Christianity or paganism.
What's left?
That's it, right? And so you look at the ancient world, and Aristotle thought that manual labor was for slaves. Cicero loved the time on this farm, but could never imagine touching dirt.
Yeah,
there was
dirt is gross.
Has worms. I'm a man and not a worm. Yeah, Psalmist said, right? And then all of a sudden, we start to have that same, orientation now. Is where parents feel bad about sending their kids off to the skilled trades. They think blue collar work is, dirty, nasty, and gross. And meanwhile, John Paul II says that Christianity brought about a fundamental change of ideas in this field, talking about manual labor, taking the whole content of the gospel message at its point of departure, especially the fact that the one who, while being God, became like us in all things, devoted most of the years of his life on earth to manual work, and at the carpenter's bench. The
Yeah.
word became flesh and picked up a hammer.
Exactly.
You know,
How bad can that be? You know, and I know, I think really the skilled
well, got
trades.
crucified. I don't
Yeah,
know.
it actually could be really bad if you think about it. The skilled trades offer an opportunity for a person to work independently and think creatively and build things that are beautiful and good and serve a purpose. And it affords them, in a sense, a bit more freedom to, because there's such a demand. Like there's more freedom in the skilled trades than there would be in something where you'd be in a corporate setting where you're going to just be a cog in the machine.
Yeah.
You know, in the skilled trades, you're still, in a sense, in this capitalist system, you're still a cog in the machine. You're going to do job X, Y, and Z, but you have more autonomy. Like how you do that job is up to you. And you know,
can you give us an example of that?
Yeah. So we do a lot of work in commercial buildings.
Yeah.
And you know, one job that we've done is we've come in to repair work from other contractors, and it's really kind of funny. The doors didn't close, and the floors were all over the place, and the walls were all crooked, and I mean, just the place was a total mess. And we come in there, and we spend, you know, it was supposed to be a couple of weeks just fixing doors, and then it turned into a couple of months fixing everything, and then it turned into, you know, like 6 months of work. And it was just and so we're looking around, and you know, it's just a reminder for us, just seeing this bad workmanship, that it's really edifying to do great work. It's really fun. And it's not just a matter of pride, it's also a matter of justice. You know, someone's paying me to do this thing, I better do it to the best of my ability.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm very blessed. My crew in my business they're just the best.
They're special guys.
They are.
Yeah.
I mean, philosophy and theology majors, and they're just awesome guys. And the lunchtime conversations are just the best. And these guys all understand that, you know, they'll come into a job where somebody else has been working and see this kind of work, and they just shake their heads and they just start tearing it out and fixing it, you know. And another example of that would be my son is working on a mass masonry apprenticeship, building like solid brick houses. They're really neat. There's a cameraman on that job who's doing a documentary about this mass masonry
Cool.
architectural style. And he told me a story that, you know, he's filming all the boys and all the apprentices doing their work. And he said that Joe was working up on on the upper floors, and he started laying in a brick wall, and he got about, you know, 4 or 5 feet down the run, and a couple feet high with the wall, and then just kind of looked at it, got out a level, got out a string, checked the wall, and it wasn't right. And so he didn't say anything. He just tore it all out and started over, and didn't make any fuss about it. He wasn't really angry about it or upset that he made a mistake. He just fixed it. It was just what he did. And that's the way my guys are on the crew. It's like, you find something that's not right, you just fix it. Just make it right, you know, and do the best that you can. And it's personally edifying. It's a matter of justice. It's like what we owe our customer.
Yeah.
And it's just a great thing to be able to do, because you're participating in something beautiful instead of something that you're just doing to check a box.
A lot of people would say that's just that is drudgery. I think that's why like blue collar trades oftentimes in the modern world just are looked down upon, because I'm not sure. You can fact check me on this one, but I think, you know, why is it that the pagans, you know, both modern and old, don't like that type of labor? And I think it's because your finitude is totally proven. Like if you're working with your mind for a living, like you can go off to every different
but you never build anything.
Yeah.
You never do anything
but
tangible.
Don't you think that's the reason, you know, why they like? I mean, it has to be a perverted thought.
Absolutely. So that's the thing. It's like evil perverts the good.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, I don't mean to say that somebody who's just in a thinking world doesn't do anything, because we talked earlier about how the
Yeah.
contemplative none accomplishes a great work.
Yeah.
You know, what I mean to say is that there are a lot of people who go to work and pretend that they're playing office all day.
Yeah.
Really, they are. They're just playing office. And the beauty of the trades is that you can literally build something and look at it right now.
Yeah.
And you can look at the fact that it's perfect, or as close to perfect as things can be. It's as well as you could have done the job.
Yeah.
You know, and that's edifying. And the guys, like, our lunch breaks on the job are conversations about politics and theology and philosophy, and there's a collaborative element of work as well. So there's a spirit and a culture that goes into, you know, fine workmanship, and that spirit translates into the other parts of their lives. You know, it's part of a whole. Like, you don't find that exceptional craftsman in a vacuum. You don't find that guy not caring about other parts of his life. You know, if there's a guy who's gone to the point where they are an exceptional craftsman, they've also really refined other parts of their life. I've found, I don't know a lot of guys who are in the bars all night and then go and do really beautiful work the next day. You know,
and remind me when Plato, you know, or rather Socrates, the guy that goes and pokes holes in everybody's arguments, always demonstrating to them that they don't actually know anything.
Yeah.
He turns around and he says, like, who is someone in society that actually knows something? He says it's a craftsman.
Yeah.
Because they can just point and said, look, I knew how to do that, and I did it.
I did it.
You know?
Yeah, I see that thing over there.
And so it makes sense that they would actually, you know, that the person who actually knows something would then be able to translate real knowledge into other areas.
Yeah.
You know,
but there's also
more metaphysical.
There's also a contemplative part to this, to the trades, I think. Most of the guys I know, even in the very, you know, sort of secular environment, they all have headphones in. They're listening to books on tape. They're listening to podcasts. They're growing and learning as they're working, pulling wires through a conduit all the way through a 20,000 square foot warehouse. They're listening to things that are helping them grow. Now, not all of them. Some of them, it's just heavy metal, you know, rocking out. But many of them are actually developing their minds, and there's a contemplative aspect to it, and there's a quiet that comes from the trades, even though it's a very noisy environment. Literally, it's extremely noisy. Most of us have hearing damage.
What?
Exactly. Yeah. I can't hear you. There's a contemplative element about being in the trades where you really can, if you like to think about things and explore ideas, it's a good place to just find a quiet space to work on something with your hands and think about something beautiful with your mind. You know, that's what I've always found. I've always really enjoyed that part of it.
Well, if you guys are in Steubenville, you should come over to our shop.
Yeah, definitely come to the shop. It's sweet.
We're trying to figure out how technology will allow you to see pictures of this. But in the meantime, you can go to SteubenvilleWorkshop.com. Like, you're going to teach some bowl, you know, turning classes,
I sure hope to, yeah.
That's going to be awesome.
I should have brought some bowls with me today. I thought about it, but I forgot to get them.
Any pipes?
I have
pipes.
I made a long Gandalf pipe once. It's really neat.
Really?
And I smoked it a lot, and then it kind of fell apart. I really liked it. It was really nice because you could have a really hot, fiery bowl of tobacco down here, and it had a long time for the smoke to cool down before it got to your mouth. So it was really an enjoyable. I highly recommend the Gandalf pipe.
Maybe that's what we should do for the new Polity, you know, conference the day before.
That would be fun. They're kind of tricky. The way I did it is I took a dowel and I drilled it out, and then I steamed it and bent it, and then I shaved it to the shape, and then I fitted it to a regular bowl, like, you know, this lower part of the pipe.
That's clever.
It was just the only way I could figure out how to. I really wanted to make one, so that's just what I figured out how to do. And this was before it was in my little garage, and I used just a long drill bit, and I mounted a drill to the table.
Long drill bit,
yeah, it was a long drill bit, and I mounted the drill to the table, and I just kind of worked that thing through, and tried to keep it centered. It was interesting. It worked. I had a few failed attempts, but it worked in the end.
That is awesome. Wow. Well, thanks so much for this conversation, and
Yeah, thank you.
I
It's
think
been fun.
we'll kind of keep up. I think work is just so important to get right. If we don't have
Yeah,
work right, then I think we're just going to kind of fail at trying to understand everything else. So
absolutely.
this is a good start to a great conversation.
Yep, absolutely.
See you in the
Well,
shop.
thank you. Yep.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.